All right, let's talk about something you probably have in your kitchen right now. Bread. Yeah, bread. Seems pretty simple, right? But what if I told you that inside every single loaf, there's a hidden story? A story that literally shaped our entire world.
So here's a question for you. What came first, the farmer or the baker? And I know what you're thinking, easy. First we learned to farm, settle down, and then we started baking bread. Makes sense, but what if that's completely backwards? What if the story of civilization as we know it has a major twist? All thanks to a few burnt crumbs.
Get this. Archaeologists in Jordan found these tiny charred breadcrumbs. No big deal, right? Except they dated them, and they are 14,400 years old. Let that sink in. This means our hunter-gatherer ancestors were baking bread 4,000 years before they invented agriculture. This is a huge deal.
So what does that even mean? It means our craving for bread, that simple, delicious thing, might be the very reason we decided to stop wandering and start farming in the first place. Our desire for a loaf of bread could be what started civilization itself. Yeah, the whole story we thought we knew, it's been flipped on its head. Okay, let's dive in. So here's how we're gonna break it down. We'll start with that ancient craving, then see how bread became the fuel of empire, how it became a symbol for the body and soul, and finally, look at our modern global obsession with it.
All right, section 1, an ancient craving. Let's dig into how our ancestors went from this backbreaking work to the fluffy bread we know today. And believe it or not, it probably all started with a happy accident. You know the phrase, the daily grind? Well, for thousands of years, it was literal. We're talking about women spending hours every single day hunched over these things called saddle querns, just grinding grain by hand with a stone. It was brutal work. Seriously, archaeologists have looked at the skeletons of ancient Egyptian women, and they often have severe arthritis in their knees and backs just from doing this day in and day out. Now, for most of early history, bread was basically a dense, flat cracker. Think tortillas or matzo. So how do we get to light, fluffy bread? Well, the leading theory is that it was a total accident. Just picture it. Somebody mixes up some flour and water, forgets about it for a couple of days, wild yeast in the air gets into it, and suddenly it's all puffy and bubbly. Instead of throwing out what looks like spoiled dough, some brave soul decided, let's cook it anyway. And you know, there's even a bit of folklore about how this happened. The story goes that it was all because of a domestic dispute. An Egyptian husband comes home, sees this puffy fermented dough, and gets furious at his wife, yelling, "You let it spoil." In his anger, he chucks it into the fire, only to discover that the result was way lighter and tastier than their normal bread. It's kind of funny to think one of the greatest food inventions might have started with an argument.
Okay, next up, section 2, the fuel of empire. Let's talk about how this simple food went on to build some of the greatest superpowers in the ancient world, like Egypt and Rome.
So think about building the pyramids. That takes an insane amount of energy, right? Well, archaeologists near Giza found these huge industrial-scale bakeries. We're talking facilities that could churn out enough bread to feed 100,000 workers. And get this, that's how they were paid. Their daily wage wasn't money, it was bread and beer. They were literally working for their daily bread. And the Egyptians were brilliant. They didn't just stumble upon leavened bread and leave it at that. Nope. They figured out that if they saved a little piece of that puffy dough, they could use it to kickstart the next day's batch. 4,000 years ago, they invented the sourdough starter. Yes, that thing that became a huge trend a couple of years ago, the Egyptians were way ahead of us. Now let's jump over to Rome.
The Romans understood something absolutely crucial. A hungry population is an angry population. So to keep things stable, they created this program called the Cura Annone. It was basically the world's first giant welfare program. Unemployed citizens would get a monthly ration of about 75 pounds of grain, all to prevent riots and keep the peace.
And this is where bread gets a little darker. It becomes a tool for political manipulation. The Roman poet Juvenal famously said, "Give them bread and circuses and they will never revolt." His point was that if you keep the masses fed and entertained with gladiator games, they won't really care that their political rights are being taken away. It's a pretty cynical but maybe accurate view of power.
Okay, for our third section, we're gonna see how bread became more than just food. We're talking bread, body, and soul, and how this staple food became a powerful symbol of the divine. This is a really cool theory. You know the story of the feeding of the 5,000, right? Well, some scholars have proposed a different interpretation. What if it wasn't about magically multiplying a few loaves of bread?
What if it was a metaphor for sharing a sourdough starter, a mother dough? Think about it. You can split a starter and share it endlessly, and everyone can then go bake their own bread. It's a miracle of a different kind.
Because that's the key thing to understand about a starter. It's not just dough, it's a living culture of yeast and bacteria. It's alive. And if you take care of it, it can literally live forever. There are starters out there today that are over 150 years old. So it's no wonder people started to see it as a symbol of immortality, of life itself.
And this idea reaches its peak in Christianity with the famous words, "I am the bread of life." Suddenly, bread isn't just about filling your stomach, it's about feeding your soul. It becomes this central symbol of faith. And that connection was so powerful that for hundreds of years in Europe, wasting bread wasn't just messy, it was considered a serious sin. So just how important was this living dough to people? Well, check this out. In medieval Europe, and even later with miners during the gold rush, it got cold. So cold that the yeast in their starters could die. Their solution, they'd sleep with the dough pouch. Literally, tucked in with them, using their own body heat to keep their future meals alive. That's dedication.
All right, last section. Let's fast forward to today and look at our global obsession with bread. And I guarantee some of these numbers are gonna blow your mind.
So if I asked you which country is the capital of bread, you might say France. Maybe Italy? Well, you'd be wrong. In terms of variety, the undisputed champion is Germany. They have over 3,000 different kinds of bread. It's so important to their culture that UNESCO has even recognized it as a piece of world heritage. But they aren't the ones who eat the most.
Not even close. When we're talking about pure consumption, who eats the most bread per person? The world record holder is Turkey, and the number is just staggering. The average person in the US eats about 53 pounds of bread a year. In Turkey, they eat 440 pounds. 440! For a lot of people, that's literally more than their own body weight in bread, every single year.
So when you think about it, bread has done it all. It fueled workers, it built empires, it shaped religions for over 14,000 years. The story of bread is really the story of us. It's a perfect reminder that real history, the stuff that truly matters, isn't always in some dusty textbook. Sometimes it's baked right into the food on our tables. What you should take away from this is just how much history is hidden in the things we see every day.